Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makul with you at PTB World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two major developments. First, with reference to what is going on in our neighborhood, where we have seen that India has laid the foundation of a new airbase in Gujarat near the India-Pakistan border, claiming that this will be an effective center for the country's security. And this came following a defense expo, which was also inaugurated by the Prime Minister Modi. And he talked about how this was an important development, considering that it was an unprecedented event in terms of only Indian companies participating, and that India's move now to be more self-reliant in terms of its weaponry and defense equipment is gaining pace, and that from now onwards more and more of this equipment is going to be procured locally, and there will be more items on the list of items that are not going to be imported by the country. But of course, what is more important at this moment is considering what this means in terms of the way that India is actually evolving. This, of course, is not something that is happening in isolation. At the same time, we have seen that human rights violations and whatever is going on both inside India and in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is something which speaks volumes about the real nature of India and how undemocratic it is. Despite the way that the international community seems to be behaving, this is what the reality is. And at this moment, when we take a look of such a country and in the hands of such a responsible and extremist government, what it maybe is going to come out of such defense developments. And then, of course, Pakistan and India have had a complicated past in too. And because of that, this remains a major security concern, not just for the two countries, but also for the entire region. So what in terms of regional security is going to be looked at? Recently at the 90th Interpol General Assembly, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke about how, in fact, there are threats that are global and so need a global response. And that, of course, is interesting because we'll try to understand what exactly does he mean by that, since he's contributing a lot towards the instability and chaos that we see now in the region and moving forward also. So what is going to be done with regards to that? Of course, that is going to be the focus of our attention. Also, we'll keep in mind what the UNSG has spoken about with regards to India and its involvement with regards to human rights violations and abuses and how it needs to act more responsibly. That is going to be our first segment of the show today, and we're going to take a look at all of this in the context of course, the fact that these two countries are also nuclear armed. This is something that the Pakistan's ambassador to the UN mission in Geneva also spoke at the UN General Assembly session, where different counterterrorism efforts and disarmament efforts were discussed, especially in terms of nuclear disarmament, in which it was pointed out by the Pakistani representative that we are nowhere close to actually moving towards disarmament, since we keep changing the goalposts of non-proliferation that need to be achieved. And in light of all of that, what we still see in terms of the development in the defense area by India and countries such as India within the region is, of course, a huge concern. So that is going to be our first segment of the show today, and the focus of the debate. At the end, we'll also be taking a look in our second segment what is going on in the UK. We know that the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, said on Thursday that she would resign as the British Prime Minister, which means that she will be the Prime Minister who's had the shortest term in the UK for about just 45 days. And this is going to be, of course, a major development within the UK and what it's going to mean in terms of who's going to be coming in now, what sort of options remain, and what really is the reason for this happening. There is, of course, a lot of statements coming in with regards to who's going to be the likely contestants, and then what is going to happen in terms of the evolving political situation in the UK, which is also going to be the focus of our second segment today. For this and more, I've been joined in the studios, as always, by senior analysts Farooq Batafi and Raja Faisal. And for our first segment with regards to what's happening in India and its meaning in terms of regional stability and security, especially in the context of Pakistan and its bilateral engagements, we've been joined by Dr. Jameel Khan, as the former ambassador, and Dr. Ishtaq Ahmed, member Planning Commission of Pakistan. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us today. Let me start with you, Dr. Jameel. When we take a look at this particular situation, and of course try and understand the kind of responses that we have seen in the past of major developments by India, it seems perhaps that there isn't much that we can expect in terms of an actual tangible consequence for India's movements within the region. There have been numerous occasions and measures taken by India which point towards the way that this particular country is in fact looking at its own developments, making steps and taking measures which are harmful for its own country, and then also in terms of the region as well. However, it is not the country then again that is labeled as dangerous. And this is of course important because when we take a look at how that's going to impact regional security, it should be a concern not just for Pakistan but for the rest as well. And on top of all of this, we see that there have been major developments on the defense side, especially with regards to now what has happened in terms of the airbase being established in Gujarat. And this, of course, seeming to be something that Prime Minister Modi says is going to be an effective center. But of course, this also means that this is a huge concern for Pakistan since it's near the border. Considering all of these developments and what it means for Pakistan in terms of its peace and security, and then also in terms of regional peace and security, what major developments do you think can happen which should really be of concern for the entire community and the region as well?
No, obviously, they are going to be out of balance in terms of their conventional armament and conventional arms and ammunition. The way Modi, the Prime Minister of India, the way he described that more than about 113 or 114 the products of the defense item, which they were importing from outside, now they have started manufacturing themselves. That's one. But then we have to also focus that Indians very recently, last about 7, 8 years, they have entered into 4 different agreements with the US, and those defense collaboration, defense agreement, including the agreement which brings the intelligence sharing and communication capability agreement, and one agreement known as BECA, Basic Exchange Cooperation Agreement, Logistic Exchange Agreement 2016. Now, Logistic Exchange Agreement, they've just given this fancy name, but this is an agreement where they can use the air bases, the naval bases in Gujarat. Now, Gujarat is a logistic-based naval base already established, and that's under the pretext of the logistic support and the refueling of the United States. So if these 4 indicators which I just indicated, if we see it in a broader spectrum, then we'll probably reach to a conclusion that the US, the way they are supporting on the defense side, in particular India, and obviously they want that Indians should help the United States and its allies in terms of containment of China. So that's one aspect. Now, coming back to the regional, obviously the region always would raise concern. But in Pakistan and India, there's a different scenario altogether. Now, Pakistan and India, we also understand that if this conventional disbalance between the two countries, this could be more dangerous for the world. Because Indians, if they start using their conventional weapon out of the proportion, although I was speaking with certain experts, Air Force retired air marshals, and
Right, absolutely. Unfortunately, I think we have lost the audio connection with Ambassador Jamil, but we'll try and reconnect with him once again. But this of course, is an important
I
aspect.
can hear
Yes,
you.
yes, Ambassador Sab, you're back with us. Go
I
ahead,
can hear
please.
you properly. I can hear you. So
Go ahead,
what
go ahead. We can
what
hear you
have
too now.
right? We I've consulted certain air marshals retired, and then this Gujarat Airways is should not be much of the concern to us. The only concern which people like myself at the strategic level can have is because they have this agreement of using the bases, the US in particular with India, and Gujarat being so close, and the proximity to Afghanistan and other places. So that would definitely cause a little complications. But more important, what you had indicated in your, or what you mentioned, illustrated in your intro, the kind of human rights violation, the more weapons, the more armament, the more bullets they produce, the more the pellet guns they produce, they use it in violation of the human rights, and which is clearly demonstrated in the Human Rights Commission, not one but two Human Rights Commission and the United Nations report, in which how they have used indiscriminately, they have used the weapon in Kashmir, in the occupied Kashmir. So, and then they have blinded the children, they have
Right,
blinded the women, they have
absolutely.
blinded people.
Absolutely, Ambassador
So,
Saab, and that's important because we need to look at it in the entire context of what is going on within India and within the illegally occupied territory as well. Dr. Ishtaq, it's funny also that the Prime Minister Modi spoke about how there are, of course, global threats and global concerns. You talked about various measures of crimes and terrorism and activities that need a global response. And there's also a lot going on in terms of the Interpol conference, a discussion around the fact that there's going to be a first ever report on international crimes trend that is going to be released. And of course, that's the foundation of which is going to be with regards to collection of data. And when we talk about data, this is perhaps something that is really lacking in terms of what is going on within India. We don't have real numbers or figures or what really is happening within the occupied territory as well, and then elsewhere within India as well. In such a light, and in terms of what we have seen from the Modi government, can we really expect any significant contribution from the international community or bodies such as the Interpol GA when we take a look at what is happening in terms of countries such as India? Because at the end of the day, they have their own power, their own leverage with these international community members, and whatever is going to happen within their own home grounds is perhaps not going to translate into any sort of effective response strategy. And if they're involved in the development of that, then how can we expect to proceed forward?
Well, Sana, thank you for having me. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
You see, the thing is, India perhaps is stuck in the past. You see, countries like Pakistan have moved forward. We are, planning for the future. We are thinking about, the horrific effects of climate change. Our foreign policy in the last few years is effectively transformed from, the traditional geopolitics, war-centric history to a geo-economic, progressive centric future. So we want to resolve conflicts with India. We are not focused upon building air bases or holding defense expos. This is a matter of history. What we are saying is basically that let us sit together, resolve the pending conflicts, because at the end of the day, whether it is man-made climate, disasters and other issues like terrorism, crime, and other SDGs, 17 of them, our actually interests in this region and in the world coincide fundamentally. So it is a matter of choice whether we would like as a nation to be stuck in the past or we would like to move forward. All of these issues, whether it is crime, terrorism, conflict, and other issues where the global politics have moved over decades, beyond the Second World War. These are things of the past, and we need to move fast forward, beyond these things, which is
Right.
why we want, as part of our national security policy, the resolution of Kashmir with India, and then a hell lot of openings are available with India and other countries in South Asia to move forward.
Absolutely, and that's an important aspect, of course. But unfortunately, we haven't seen much of that happening. Faisal, when we take a look at all of this, and also in terms of what Modi has said at the Interpol conference, also he talked about how in the past pigeons were released, something that he referred to of Nehru's practice, and how this time around times are changing, and now cheetahs are released. And when we take a look at this and the kind of emphasis that is being laid by the leader of a country and talking about how this is a major development and something to be proud of, we are moving further and further away from what the global community talks about in terms of disarmament, in terms of peace, and in terms of dialogue. And then, of course, when we take a look at this particular issue, we are of course a neighbor of this country, and we don't really have an option in terms of getting away from this particular consequence of what is happening and the kind of developments that are going there. And then again, when we take a look at what is happening in Kashmir, this is of course quite a difficult position for us to be able to engage in dialogue. We've had extended this to the Indian leadership that we're open to dialogue, but of course, as the PM earlier said, the onus is on the Indian side. In all of this context, maybe perhaps this doesn't seem to be something that is a possibility in the near future. And if at the same time we have such developments coming in from across the border, what is Pakistan's response going to be? Should we also match the responses that are coming in from India? How do we counter whatever is happening over there, or do we just keep on hoping for any sort of international intervention that we haven't seen?
Sana, first of all, I think Dr. Jamil was very right when he obviously talked about this, that of course this airbase is going to be strategically important for India, not owing to the fact that they have long-standing conflict with Pakistan, and of course they are just trying to make it as an opportunity for the Americans. Of course, we know for a long time they have been posed by the US against China. So this is something to do with Quad. This is something to do obviously with the future, how the seas of the Indian Ocean would work in the coming future. But here, very interesting statements coming out from Modi. Obviously, first of all, we need to talk about Gujarat. He's talking about Gujarat, and of course it was an Interpol General Assembly and everyone was there, and he was talking about it. Nobody would have asked him about whatever he did in Gujarat back in 2002, the carnage he ignited for the Muslim, and still people are missing, still people are complaining about their rapes and exactly. So nobody asked him about it. And the second thing is, times, these are not the times for the pigeon. Well, very right. And these are the times for the cheetahs. Well, fair enough, you might have cheetahs, but still you have jackals to sit in them. So obviously whatever the cheetahs you have to have lions to sit in them. That's when it matters. If you have jackals who are sitting in them and piloting them, then they would meet their fate as Abhinandan met once. So we are not worried at all about it. But the very important point I wanted to make here was, back in days, I think it was 2002, December 2002, I had a conversation with one of the defense analysts from India, and I obviously highlighted that whatever has happened in Galwan, when are you going to avenge it? And he said to me that whatever happens to us in mountains, we will avenge in the waters. So to me, it seems as if very soon there will be sort of a reaction by Chinese as well. We should not be forgetting that Chinese are concerned about Indian expansions, obviously near the seas. So I think it might be for China as well.
Right, and I understand that, Faisal, but when we talk about what options do we have, perhaps avenging is not the only one we should be concerned about. There is, of course, a lot at stake at what is happening, and of course we have no doubt in the capabilities of our armed forces, Farooq, and we have had a proof coming in from various times before as well, that they have, of course, laid down their lives and sacrificed everything, and they have a full capability of defending the motherland. But at the end of the day, the developments, according to Faisal, perhaps nothing to worry about, but shouldn't they be of concern in terms of what possibilities they hold, especially in light of what has been discussed by our ambassador in Geneva as well, in terms of nuclear disarmament and the possibility of this particular realm also becoming real? And then when we take a look at the way technology is also developing and the way cyber crimes or financial crimes are happening and how India is perhaps involved in all of them, then how exactly do we move forward with any sort of coordinated strategy? What options does Pakistan have at the moment?
Right, Sana, I will love to respond to this beautiful question. But before that, allow me to actually take into cognizance many other things that were said earlier. For example, the cheetahs. Let me disabuse you of the moniker called Indian cheetahs. India killed its own cheetahs 70 years ago. It was Namibia that actually donated those 8 cheetahs, those border cheetahs that were actually released in that habitat, just to ensure that natural life returns. Now, cheetah or pigeons or whatever you want to have, they don't change the character of a country. What changes is its leadership, which through this comment evidently shows that it is free of any kind of intelligence, right? But regarding what happened in Gujarat, amazingly, when in 2014 Narendra Modi was running for premiership, at that time everybody kept on talking about Gujarat model. Gujarat model essentially is referenced not to how economics actually worked there, but total marginalization of Indian, minorities, particularly in Gujarat, who are living in ghettos after that genocide that we saw. And that same model has been repeated all over India, and it is quite evident in front of your eyes. Regarding one thing, I had actually vowed never to talk about India until Narendra Modi is in power. There are two or three reasons. One, it is heartbreaking what is happening to India. I think that UNSG, when he was speaking in India yesterday, he was totally right. But anybody from President Obama to UNSG, everyone who keeps on reminding India the marvel that India was, or the promise that India once had, is gone out of the window because of this sad or bad choice that Indians made in 2014. Now the kambal, the blanket doesn't leave them. There's a joke in Urdu, someday I will actually interpret that for you as well. The second thing is, strangely enough, every time I've spoken about India, strange things start happening around me. So the superstitious me doesn't want to actually waste his time in talking about a gone or lost cause. But every time I'm assigned a topic, or every time there's a commission I have to, I'm honor bound to talk about it. India at this moment is totally devoid of vision. They are actually depending on other countries' ambitions to actually, piggyback and continue the way they are. And they keep on talking about strategic, importance, this, that, and the other thing. Frankly, anybody, and pardon my French, anybody who thinks that India and Pakistan should ever have a nuclear war, or China or India should ever have nuclear war, are bucking mad. Why? Because there is such a thing as mutual assured destruction, and the fact that we are sitting next to each other.
Absolutely.
Even the mushroom cloud will kill people on the other side as well. So with that kind of stupidity, I think whatever India does is India actually doing whatever it has been doing for quite some time, and it did not save the USSR, similar kind of things. I think at this moment we don't have transparency regarding their economy, and their economy seems to have been in a state of affairs where everything is down, but their numbers keep going up. So it seems that they are actually massaging the numbers, they are being creative with the truth, and one day when all this fog actually dissipates, you'll know that the economy is in dire straits.
Right.
Yeah. Sana, if you can allow me, I wanted to go towards obviously Dr. Jamil. Dr. Jamil, we know that last year, of course, the Chinese, they created 4 air bases along the border of India, along with the border that connects with Arunachal Pradesh. Could we say that this step by India is to match the Chinese? But when we talk about matching it, of course, they have 4 along that border rather than going there. Of course, they are, constantly avoiding Chinese. So this means that they don't want to ignite anything against China because they know that they will be gobsmacked, and they're just trying to show their people, well, here we are keeping ourselves all set and ready for our western border.
This is what Modi was mentioning, that they have now the forces, the Indian security forces have attained the level where they can strike balance with any, he meant with any power, or they are self-sufficient now. So from that perspective, establishing bases not in front of China, rather on the border of Pakistan. Obviously, your point could be very much there into the consideration. But the fact is, Indians, they know that if they make 2 more or 1 more air base close to the line of actual control, they know that Chinese could give a befitting response to that, and they could construct as many as they like. even much more than. And they don't want to really enter into that conflict, which could trigger off any such response which they had seen in the recent past and the way they suffered. Although they are being pushed, although they are being motivated, although they are being inspired, and I just referred you those four salient agreements which Indians had with the US. And I would immediately connect this point of the four agreements where the kind of PAK cooperation, the communication capability agreement, and by the way, that is intelligence sharing agreement also, which means that the Americans could supply them of any movement, any intelligence in this entire region. That includes China as well. And then Indians could be asked to help the other forces or other parts of the world. So I'll immediately connect that with the Moody's address to the participants of the defense exhibition. And who were the major participants? All the Indian Ocean, particularly Indian Ocean defense ministers, particularly those who are in the African continent. So those defense ministers were there in the industry. And then immediately I would like to connect with what Faisal had just mentioned. It's a spring of pearl and a spring of alliance. The strength which they are trying to show, the string of alliance to the string of pearls means the US and its allies, the AUKUS, the Quads, and the string of pearl, which is China, and its allies, the ports which starts from Gwadar and then goes right up to the South China Sea. So if we connect all these dots, we can understand that India is trying to get maximum benefit from the United States also. At the same time, they don't really want to confront with China at this point in time, right? At the future state, who knows? Because India is India has it's so much of trade interest with China that at future stage, to what extent they cooperate with the United States is a matter of time, and then the future will decide about it. Now, whether these facilities could have any harm on Pakistan, as I was saying, that it is equally vulnerable. The Gujarat air base equally vulnerable in the artillery range of Pakistan. So the vulnerability, like Pathankot, is equally vulnerable, and it's within the artillery range as well as our air force. We have already demonstrated what we did with Aminan and those operations at that time. So, but basically, we are not really worried. Although the conventional side, they are trying to spend lots of money, and the balance which our permanent representative, our NY, Mr. Hashmi in Geneva, has also mentioned about disarmament, and there he mentioned about the balance of the conventional arms and ammunition and the armament. Conventional armament, if it goes out of balance, it triggers off the danger of the nuclear side. So therefore, world is keeping an eye on it, and I don't think India could really make any adventure which they thought they could make and get away with it. So we are
right, and perhaps that may be true when we take a look at what sort of concerns we may have, and of course, in terms of a nuclear threat or in terms of conventional war, even if we put that aside, there are still a lot of other concerns that we have with regards to what is happening within India and within the occupied territory. And it seems that perhaps India is deteriorating further and further, and then perhaps it will come to a point where it will self-destruct or disintegrate into something which will be hard to manage. But is this really a concern that is shared by the international community as well, Dr. Ishtiaq? Because at the same time, when we take a look at how perhaps India is deteriorating, there also seems to be no real consequence in terms of its bilateral engagements with the international community, even if it is with the US or other countries or the African countries as part of the Defense Expo or any others, despite the very obvious undemocratic measures that the BJP has taken. It doesn't seem that during their tenure there has been any real damage to the relationship that India enjoys with the international community and other countries. And if that is so, how can the concern of what is going on within India and within the occupied territory be made a global concern? Because at this moment it doesn't seem to be relevant in the conversation between bilateral engagements of India and other countries.
Well, as you know, Sana, there has been a lot of concern even in Western media and even within the Congress, U.S. Congress. There has been a concern about the direction that India is taking under the BJP rule, and particularly the impact on traditional secular values of Hindutva politics. I think this is an issue that has been taken up, many times. And remember, after India actually annexed the disputed territory of Kashmir and divided it, I think there was a unanimity in international public opinion, as expressed in, even throughout Western media, that it was a violation of the UN Security Council resolution. It was not Pakistan alone which was, protesting at that time. And subsequently, I don't think that these views have significantly changed. Personally, you see, I see, as you pointed out, you know, India is effectively on a destructive course, and we really feel sorry for the Indian minorities, and especially our Muslim brothers, in Kashmir and elsewhere in India. India is facing a serious leadership crisis, and as far as Pakistan is concerned, Sana, two things I would like to emphasize. One, that because of the nuclear capability that we have, qualitatively superior, even if less in number, because of the conventional superiority, I would argue we have because of the qualitatively superior weapons, even if less in number. I think Pakistan does not feel any threat to its defenses. Secondly, we have had, close collaborations with our neighboring countries, especially China. With China, we have a project of the future. It is a 22nd century project, and we will be together, inshallah, not only economically, politically, people to people, but also if time came in the geopolitical sphere, also we will collaborate. And I will also emphasize that our relationships are not fixated on China alone. There are zigs and zags in US-Pakistani relationship, but whenever anything has happened in this region, America has moved closer to Pakistan, not to India. India has tried, twice in the past, failed each time. So these things keep happening, and as Ambassador Saab just pointed out, we have to wait and see, because this is a very complex world we live in, even in the wake of the Ukraine war. You look at India where it is standing. It is feeding a middle path, and ultimately the Indian people or Indian intelligentsia might be pragmatic enough to see some kind of a balance in great power relationships.
Right. Farooq, when we take a look at all of this, and you can add to this as well, but also in terms of how the world sees India and its developments, is it a matter of not really seeing India as undemocratic, or is it the fact that it is something that the world understands but chooses to ignore?
Right, Sana, it might be choosing to ignore it right now because there are many reasons. One is economic, the other one is Indian diaspora, which was, really connected to India, and they used to cherish India's identity. But thanks to people like us, most of the influencers all over the world have been inoculated from that kind of, silent assault. So I think that our job is done. Gradually, people, whenever there will be an overreach, people will notice it and they will respond or react to it as well. But for now, of course, because everything is going India's way, that is something that the world seems to have made peace with for the time being. But these things actually start laying eggs later. So you'll see a massive explosion. By the way, in Stanford University, there were many workshops that were done on the worst case scenarios of global crises, right? One of them, actually not one, number one of them was India's collapse. You see, India has two forces, one centrifugal, one centripetal, right? I will call it Akbarization. Akbar was a great empire builder who collected everybody and united everybody, married a Hindu woman. And then there was Aurangzeb Alamgir, the guy who actually overreached because he had to invade Deccans, and that's why the entire kingdom actually started, or empire started falling apart, and eventually the British took over. I think these guys have not learned from the example of Aurangzeb Alamgir. Any attempt to make India homogeneous perforce will always have its negative consequences. And I think that while we keep on talking about India's role on the global stage, I think what we have to rather be looking at is inside India, what is going on.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much, Dr. Ishtiaq, for joining us, and Dr. Jameel for joining us and being a part of the debate. We'll now move on to our second segment, which is with reference to what is going on in the UK, where the Prime Minister has announced that she will be stepping down with just about 45 days in office. And this means that there is going to be a lot of concern as to what happens next. She was under a lot of criticism with regards to the September mini budget, which is now left abandoned, and what is going to happen, which is of course was the start of how things evolved. But now moving forward, what seems to be the evolution in the political dynamics is going to be an important discussion. Farooq, when we take a look at this, first of all, what really happened in terms of the decision coming in from the Prime Minister stepping down on such after just 45 days in office?
Right. I think at this moment, as history bears witness, she is the shortest serving Prime Minister in UK's history. And that is saying something. One of the British newspapers actually had a live feed comparing her government with a cabbage, whether the cabbage actually lasts or her government does. Lettuce, I'm sorry, not cabbage, lettuce. And in the end, it is the lettuce that has won. Yeah, so that is a sad comment. But actually, you have to look at what is going on at this moment. I think after Brexit was such a big shock to the system that it actually literally broke, Conservative Party. We have seen how many prime ministers have changed. Fortunately, in the past, at least the newcomers had the grace or kindness to hold fresh elections and take fresh mandate. This mandate was taken by not this prime minister, but her predecessor, Boris Johnson, who got a lot of heavy mandate, right? Record in past many years. And then all of a sudden, there were revolts within his party because he was inconsistent on record. Because of his statements, there was a small coup in the party. We have seen Rishi Sunak and Sajid Javed actually headed a flank or faction. The Liz Truss was supported tacitly by Boris Johnson, and then of course is Penny Mordaunt. That is another faction. But while it was the prolonged, leadership quest was going on, at that time we knew that it could either go either in two directions, right? One, perhaps they can consolidate power when they actually reach across the divide within their own party and then consolidate, or they could actually choose to work with the loyalists. And that is the first mistake. That was the first mistake Liz Truss made. Her opponents were, left high and dry. She only went for a cabinet of her loyalists. That means that because it is the same party and others are very important as well, within her own benches, there were coup makers or potential coup makers. The second mistake she made was those horrible tax cuts that she actually went for without consultation on a broader level. Because of that, inflation grew, and eventually she had to withdraw those reforms or tax cuts as well. The third one that actually took place last night was the final death knell. They tried to pass a fracking law because of what is going on in Europe already, particularly the Ukrainian war, and they wanted to actually create this energy source. And because the UK is these days very sensitive about climate change, there was a massive coup from within her party. 40 members could not actually go vote because they were manhandled. They were beaten, right? With that kind of a crisis, there had to come an end, and that has been announced. I will tell you what I think might happen next, but this sudden end doesn't augur well for the party or for the country.
Right, and I'll come back to you, Farooq, about what's going on to happen next, of course. But Faisal, before that, just quickly your opinion. Do you think that the Prime Minister made the right choice to step down?
I think she did make the right choice, because obviously
Did she have another choice at this time?
she hadn't had any others, because of course the job she has done so far is not good enough. And of course, as Farooq has mentioned, I think she had not a single day left in the office. By the way, I just wanted to highlight, right now it is a season of premier internship program going on in Britain, as we are seeing, because
That's naughty.
that
Naughty
is
of
very
it.
naughty, because only 45, and as you have mentioned about the letters as well, I think they need to seriously look into it. And of course, the Conservative Party, it has a huge majority, obviously in the
kind of.
yeah
No, it
in
is
the
broken.
in the Parliament. And as you have Farooq mentioned, I believe Rishi has a very strong group within the party,
Yeah.
and he. Plus, we should not be forgetting that Boris Johnson, he's eyeing upon the
Yeah,
Premier.
I wanted to actually spring
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
later in
going
the
to.
program, but that is also a surprise.
He's also eyeing upon the premier seat, and I think he might get his seat back. The reason being, at his time, of course, the things were very favorable for the Conservative Party, and Conservative Party became very strong while he was in the office. And to me, I think whatever the differences he has, he will sit with his party members and he will discuss with them. And if we talk about the problems he faced, they were minor problems. I don't think they should
They
have
were
been.
not policy issues.
Yeah, they were not policy issues.
consistency issues.
Yeah, and it was, he is known for that kind of behavior, and he is,
Does
and
that mean
that's
it's
what
minor?
that's
So
what
does
is
that mean
So,
it's
Boris.
so
okay.
you're going to give him carte blanche.
Yeah, that's what
Why you like-
Boris is all about,
right. Faisal,
Yeah.
very quickly, I want to get Farouk's intake on
Yeah.
what's next, and of course, if Boris is going to be the next.
Yeah,
PM.
Liz Truss actually was a backdoor entry, and democracies usually actually frown upon the idea of backdoor entries, because there is usually fresh mandate. And I think that last time when the mandate was taken, it was Boris Johnson who was heading it.
Yeah.
But for reasons that are known also to Raja Faisal, I don't think he will become Prime Minister right now. There are three reasons which are very important. One, because of the division within the party, right? There is huge division, as he pointed out. Rishi Sunak is very powerful bloc. Sajid Javid, that is one team. Then Penny Mordaunt came very close to Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak in the entire process of leadership challenge. And then when you talk about overall economic situation, that is not great as well. And Rishi Sunak actually has been right about economics consistently, and Sajid Javid as well. So I don't think that in coming days, and it is too soon, because at this moment Boris Johnson still is going through inquiries. So I think that it won't be easy for him to come back. And if he does, remember, there are three factions. Add the rest of the two together, the number exceeds the leaders' numbers. So eventually what is going to happen, whosoever comes, Rishi Sunak, who is by the way great, I really like his policies, or Penny Mordaunt, my favorite candidate during the last tussle, or Boris Johnson, of course he is great as well. But whosoever comes will be very quickly upstaged by the others. So it will continue until the next elections take place. The best thing at this moment is leave the leadership debate to the Conservatives, but call a fresh snap elections so that all the parties have their say and they can find a way out. If for a very short time the Conservatives or Tories have to sit even in opposition, that is even then acceptable, because the scope of crisis is huge, and whosoever comes in power is not going to be very comfortable sitting there
Right.
because
Yeah.
of Ukraine war,
Yeah.
economic crisis,
It's not a
and
good
energy
time.
crisis.
One liner,
Absolutely.
Sana, one liner.
Yes, Sachin,
You know,
very quickly.
I know that British, they always considered Boris as a nuisance creator, generator. But believe me, if they can put his personal life on a side, I think he is capable enough to come back.
All right.
And
That's all we have left.
One sentence
Yes,
more.
quickly.
I think-
you know, he is an angel compared to other options that were
Yes.
there, like Suella Braverman. You know, I'm honestly, my soul actually shakes when I contemplate her candidature. But honestly, at this moment, I think fresh election is the only answer.
And
Right,
Sana,
absolutely. All right,
one
let's
last
end it.
thing,
Yes,
one last thing.
very quickly.
You know, the
I will continue to actually
conservatives,
top it.
conservatives should not be conservative enough that they can't accept the nuisance of Boris.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much, everyone. Good luck to UK, and we hope that whatever happens is good for the people. That's all that we have from the debate at the moment. Have a nice weekend. See you Monday.